She planned her goodbye years before she left, and one name was missing on purpose. Hi, my name is Clara Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a legal assistant at a small family law firm in Seattle. 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away, but the real shock didn't happen at her funeral. It happened at the cemetery, and it revealed a boundary so powerful it extended beyond death. My grandmother, Eleanor Grace Bennett, was the kind of woman people described as strong-willed. Not loud, not argumentative, just clear. She lived in a quiet neighborhood near Tacoma in a small blue house she had owned for 40 years. She raised 2 children there, my father, Daniel, and my Aunt Rebecca. Growing up, I thought she was strict. Now I realize she was disciplined. There's a difference. The day of the funeral was gray and cold. Family members gathered in dark coats, murmuring polite condolences. My father stood stiffly near the casket, shaking hands like a man, fulfilling a social obligation. My aunt cried loudly, too loudly, but I didn't judge. Grief sounds different for everyone. After the church service, we drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of Tacoma. That's when everything changed. The headstone was already there. Polished granite. Simple. Elegant. Grandma had arranged it years earlier. Her name was engraved in soft cursive. Eleanor Grace Bennett. Below it were 2 additional spaces. One for her late husband, already filled, and one blank space beneath. Everyone assumed it was reserved for my father, her only son, the Bennett name bearer. But as we stepped closer, we realized something strange. There was no third name engraved. No placeholder. No pre-carved lettering. Just smooth stone, intentionally untouched. My father frowned. "That's odd," he muttered. My aunt crossed her arms. Maybe they made a mistake. But I knew Grandma better than that. She didn't make administrative mistakes, especially not about permanence. After the burial, the cemetery director approached us quietly. "There's something your grandmother requested," he said, handing my father a sealed envelope. It was labeled, "To be opened after my burial." My father hesitated, then tore it open. Inside was a notarized document. Grandma had prepaid for the headstone and specified that only 2 names were to be engraved. Hers and her husband's. No additions, no alterations. No future engravings allowed. My father's face drained of color. "What does this mean?" he whispered. It meant exactly what it looked like. She had chosen permanently who she wanted beside her, and who she didn't. The tension between Grandma and my father wasn't a secret, but it was never dramatic. No screaming matches. No public fallouts. Just distance. Years of it. When I was younger, I didn't understand why my dad rarely visited her, why holidays were always too busy, why phone calls were short, why apologies were never offered. But as I grew older, especially working in family law, I learned something important. Estrangement doesn't always come from explosions. Sometimes it comes from erosion. Small disappointments. Repeated neglect. Unspoken disrespect. 5 years ago, something happened that changed everything. Grandma had a minor stroke. Nothing catastrophic, but serious enough to require assistance for a few months. She asked my father if she could stay with him during recovery. He hesitated, said the house was too crowded, said his schedule was demanding, said maybe Rebecca could help. My aunt declined too. Eventually, I stepped in. I moved into her blue house temporarily, helped with medication, cooked meals, drove her to therapy appointments. One evening while I was organizing her paperwork, she said something quietly. "Clara, love is measured in inconvenience." I didn't fully grasp it then, but I do now. After her recovery, she became even more independent. She updated her will, paid off remaining debts, and apparently prepaid her gravestone. Without telling anyone, back at the cemetery, my father stared at the blank space beneath her name. "This is cruel," he said under his breath. But was it? Or was it clarity? Grandma never publicly disowned him. She never removed him from her will. She never slandered him. She simply drew a boundary, one that would outlive her. That night, I went back to her house in Tacoma to gather personal items. The rooms felt heavy with memory. In her bedroom dresser, I found another envelope addressed to me. Inside was a short handwritten note. Clara, boundaries are not punishments. They are reflections. I do not hate your father, but I will not rewrite history to make him comfortable. Rest is easier beside someone who showed up. Love you always. I sat on her bed and cried. Not because she excluded him, but because she had been forced to. The next morning, the family group chat exploded. My aunt insisted we petition the cemetery to modify the stone. My father claimed Grandma wasn't thinking clearly when she made the decision, but the notarized documents were airtight. Grandma had planned this meticulously, legally, irrevocably. And suddenly the narrative shifted. Instead of grieving her death, they were debating her boundary. At dinner that evening, my father confronted me. You knew about this. No, but you understand it. I looked at him carefully. She needed you, I said gently. And you weren't there. His jaw tightened. I sent money. She didn't need money. Silence filled the room, because we both knew what she had needed. Over the next few days, relatives whispered. Some called her dramatic. Others called her petty. But a few quietly respected her. Because here's the truth. No one wanted to say aloud. She had every right to choose her final resting place, even if it hurt someone's ego. A week late, I returned to the cemetery alone. The granite glistened under soft rain, her name carved in certainty. The blank space beneath smooth and final. It wasn't empty, it was intentional, a boundary etched in stone. And standing there, I realized something. Grandma's last lesson wasn't about exclusion, it was about accountability. I'll tell you what we discovered in her will, because the missing name on the gravestone was only the beginning, and what she left behind forced my father to confront more than just stone. If this story is touching your heart, stay with me. Because some boundaries continue speaking long after we're gone. The missing name wasn't an accident, and the will proved it wasn't emotional either. Hi, my name is Clara Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a legal assistant at a small family law firm in Seattle. If you listen to, my grandmother, Eleanor Grace Bennett, prepaid her gravestone years before she passed away and intentionally left one name off, my father's, but what we discovered a week later at the lawyer's office made it clear this wasn't impulsive. It was planned, carefully. The will reading was held at a small downtown firm in Tacoma. Ironically, it wasn't my office. Grandma had hired an independent estate attorney 5 years ago around the same time she had her minor stroke. That timing wasn't random. She believed in preparation. The conference room felt colder than it should have. My father sat stiffly across from my Aunt Rebecca. I sat beside him, though emotionally I felt miles away. The attorney, Mr. Collins, adjusted his glasses and began. Mrs. Bennett updated her will in 2021. This version supersedes all prior documents. My father nodded impatiently. He assumed everything would be straightforward. Split evenly. Family harmony preserved. He didn't know Grandma had a different definition of fairness. First, the house. The small blue house in Tacoma. I leave my primary residence, the attorney read to my granddaughter Clara Bennett. Silence. My father turned toward me sharply. What? My aunt gasped. That house was supposed to stay with Daniel, she said. But Grandma never wrote supposed to. She wrote earned. I felt my throat tighten. I hadn't expected this. I had helped her during recovery because she was my grandmother. Not for inheritance, but she had noticed. She always noticed. The attorney continued. To my daughter Rebecca, I leave my savings account in the amount of $48,000. Rebecca's breathing steadied. Then came the line that shifted everything. To my son Daniel Bennett, I leave $1. The room froze. $1. Not symbolic in anger, but symbolic in law. In estate planning, leaving someone a small amount means you intentionally did not forget them. You chose. My father's face burned red. "This is ridiculous," he said. "She was manipulated," the attorney calmly replied. "Mrs. Bennet met with me privately on 4 separate occasions. She was mentally competent and clear. I knew she had been. She'd always been clear. One evening, about 6 months after her passing, I visited the cemetery alone. The air was calm, the sky soft and gray. I stood in front of her headstone and ran my fingers over the carved letters. It didn't feel cold anymore. It felt powerful. People think boundaries are about anger. They're not. They're about truth. Grandma didn't punish my father. She protected her peace even in eternity. She didn't rewrite history to soothe anyone's pride. She left it intact, and because of that, we all had to grow. If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's too harsh to set boundaries, even permanent ones, remember this: clarity is not cruelty. Silence is not weakness. And choosing where you rest physically or emotionally is your right. Grandma's final act wasn't about exclusion. It was about integrity. And sometimes the strongest boundary is the one that doesn't need defending. It just stands in stone. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that presence truly matters, please like and subscribe, because some lessons don't end with death. They begin there,